And said thank you so much for joining us on a hot Wednesday evening. I hope you've all had a lovely day. Tonight we're going to be talking about supporting development in babies. And this webinar has been inspired by the developmental theorist Emmy Pikler. Some of you might have heard of her. Anyone who's been to my setting for one of my enabling environments visits will know that I talk about her a lot. She's one of my favourite theorists, and you'll be able to see how quite a lot of her work has influenced what we do in early years currently. So this is a Stronger Practice Hub webinar with myself, Kim Barnetson. I'm the Child Minding Partner, and we also have Lisa and Damon from the Barn, the Stronger Practice Hub team, with us this evening. I can't see the chat while I'm presenting, but Damon will keep an eye on that and let me know if there's any questions or anything come up. But I'm completely open to you just unmuting yourself and just shouting out if you've got something you want to ask me, or I've said something that you disagree with. I really welcome that, because that's what gives us the chance to really unpick some of these subjects. And it's not just me telling you something, but it's a real sort of community of practice. So let's get started. Here's our agenda for this evening. First of all, who was Emmy Pikler? We'll have a bit of a chat about her and what was her development theory. Then we're going to have a look at a Pikler baby unfolding naturally. Unfolding is a Pikler term. And you'll see sort of pictures of a baby's development, and we can talk about what they're doing in those pictures. Then we're going to consider, how is Pikler relevant to current practice today? A big focus of her work is respectful care. So what does respectful care look like in practice? And then I've got some key takeaways, which are just like one word that if you can hold those in your head, you'll have sort of got something from this evening. Unbelievably, there are criticisms of Pikler. I've got a couple of criticisms just as for balance. And then I've got some information on what you can do if you want to take it a little bit further. And I've left time at the end for a chat and any questions about anything at all, not just this webinar. But as I say, please feel free to interrupt me or put stuff in the chat. So who was Emmy Pikler? Unusually for a developmental theorist, she's fairly recent. Most developmental theorists were like a long time ago, and some of their practice can feel a bit dated, but Pikler is fairly current. So she was a Hungarian paediatrician, and in her practice, she noticed over time that some children were much calmer, they were more resilient, and they were more confident than others. And she began to sort of study these different children and try and work out why this was. And she attributed it to their early childhood experiences. It's important to say that Pikler was a contemporary of Bowlby. I think most of us are familiar with Bowlby, but if anyone isn't, Bowlby is a theorist who came up with the theory of attachment, that a child needs a strong attachment, a secure attachment with at least one adult, but preferably more than one, and it can be children as well. And in fact, now we know that Bowlby actually said the more attachments, the better, because, you know, it's good to have a network, a safety network around a child, isn't it? And Pikler theorized very similar ideas to Bowlby in that respect. So her development theory has two main approaches, which I've sort of summarized into two little chunks here for us. There's obviously a lot more to it than this. If you want to go into it in more detail, you can. There's information at the end. So the first approach is respectful care, and that's respectful, warm relationships, the awareness of the child as a person in their own right, which is especially important in intimate care. And I think actually, from what I see, when I see all of you out and about and at different groups and things, and when we talk on webinars, I know that your practice, you are doing these things, but it's quite interesting to see that you're doing it without knowing about the theory, perhaps, and that shows what a great practitioner you are. And I think hopefully we are all moving towards this, that children are a person, babies are a person in their own right. and how important it is to be respectful when we're caring for them. Again, the importance of strong attachments. So we talked, didn't we, recently about transitions and how when a child comes into our setting, what we're really doing is giving them time to transfer or form another attachment. So and they might have an attachment with their parents, and then they're coming into your setting and they're forming an attachment with you. And it's just so important. I know we've spoken about it a lot, but just to sum it up, a child's brain, like all of our brains actually, still thinks we're living in the Stone Age, still thinks we're living in a cave, and that at any moment we might get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. And so if we don't feel secure and safe as a baby, particularly, then babies' brains are flooded with cortisol. That is the hormone that gives us the fight and flight response, because we think something dreadful is going to happen at any moment. But when we're attached, we know we're safe. We know that grown up, that adult, is going to protect us from the saber-toothed tiger. Our brains calm down, and then they're responsive and ready to learn. I can't stress strongly enough the importance of a strong, secure attachment. Then it also, respectful care has been shown to help children to develop confidence and a sense of self, because they know they're loved. They feel valued and loved. They have a sense of worth. And the other part we're talking about with Pikler's approach is the natural unfolding of the child. And that's a term I used earlier on. I really love this term because actually when you see a new baby, they are a little bit scrunched up, aren't they? And if you think of them as a bit of a scrunched up baby, and then they're gradually unfolding and developing and learning how to control their bodies and explore the world around them. Pikler found in particular that babies who had been allowed to unfold and develop in their own time were more confident, more resilient. They were able to judge risk better than children who weren't able to do this, because they're in control of their body. They know what their body can do. So what does this really mean? It means we don't do things when we're a Pikler, we're following Pikler. We don't use things like bumbo seats, baby seats, baby walkers, those things that you put babies in, and they've got all the sort of musical stuff all around the side and buttons and things, activity centres or baby gyms that are dangling over a baby. We don't use any of those because, according to Pikler, and I'm in agreement with Pikler, for these babies, looking at this baby in the picture, everything is new. The whole world is new. They don't need extra stuff. Just the world is enough. So the baby in this picture, who will follow her progression in a moment, was very happy, just laying, looking around. She was learning how to move her body and to do things like look out the window, or she'd hear a noise and she'd turn her head the other way. And then she started to use her hands, wiggle her legs. She got very active on that blanket. Obviously, I picked her up and cuddled her. And she had lots of cuddles and lots of involvement with other children, but she was also very content to spend time just looking around. And so this is where Pikler says everything is new. The natural world and the child's immediate environment are enough. Obviously, we introduce some resources as the children get a little bit older, but when you think about some settings you might have been in yourself, or toddler groups, that type of thing, where it's noisy, it's echoey, there's bright colours everywhere, there's music maybe playing in the background, there are children shouting, and it's just overwhelming, isn't it? So if it's overwhelming for us, imagine what it's like for very young babies who have, everything is new. The sky is new, clouds are new, the birds flying past are new, a dog walking past, a cat walking past, everything is new. The leaves on the tree moving in the breeze, it's all new. And they don't need, just because we've already seen those things doesn't mean we need to sort of overstimulate babies. So this is a big part for Pikler is this natural unfolding of the child. So luckily for me, when I started studying Pikler, I had a new grandchild, and my daughter is a lecturer in early years, and so she's very interested in this as well. And we decided, with her permission, obviously, that we would bring up this child as a Pikler baby and record her development. And she's now 2.5. Anyone who comes to the groups that I go to will be familiar with this child, but I'm just going to talk you through. This is pretty much the first year of her development. So here she is, same picture as we previously looked at. She was laying on a padded sort of blanket, very, very happy to lay and just observe and to look around and sort of interact with anyone who was close by. It's very happy to do that for a long time. She had freedom to move her head, to move her arms, to move her legs. She was developing her core muscles because she was wriggling around a lot. I particularly like this picture, but it does need a little bit of explanation. So as she got older, obviously she was rolling over from one side to another. And in this picture, she realised, maybe for the first time, that she could have an effect on the world around her, because she accidentally kicked this box and it bumped into the chest of drawers and made a noise. It took her a long time, but she got herself into this position and she just kicked and kicked and kicked that box, and she was so happy. And imagine the confidence that a child has to know that they can do that. She didn't need an adult to do it, and she was only about 5 months old there. So this is what we mean about Pikler babies having this real confidence, especially in their physical abilities. Now, we all know about typical development, and Pikler's theory says that our brains are wired for us to develop in a particular pattern, physically especially. And usually, according to Pikler, a baby would crawl before they walked. With this child, she actually did it the other way around, but it was her that did it. So that's the way she wanted to do it. That's absolutely fine. As the EYFS and the Development Matters says, a variation in typical development doesn't necessarily mean there's a concern, does it? We've had children, I'm sure you all have in your settings, that have moved around in different ways. They don't all follow the exact pattern. But Pikler's idea is that the children left to their own devices will still follow this pattern of development with some variation. So here she'd sat up. I did start putting just a few resources around, just to give her something interesting to look at or to grab or to explore. Here she's got a little bangle, and I think there's a wooden egg cup and one of those little squishy balls next to her. And this one, you can see not long after that, she's starting to reach out for things, isn't she? And move a little bit herself, trying to grab things, and they're just out of reach, and she's got to work out how to do it. She doesn't need an adult to do that for her. It's okay for children to get a little bit frustrated. As an adult, it's our natural instinct to not let a child get frustrated, but actually that's a fairly good thing for children, because, as I say, they need that confidence. It gives them resilience that they can do these things themselves. Eventually, she's got herself into this position. She was in this sort of position for quite a long time, actually, just doing this sort of shuffling backwards and forwards for several weeks, not really crawling, but able to move around. As you can see, she's managed to pull over a load of loose parts in the background and explore her environment a little bit more. And then she's got to the stage where she's starting to pull herself up on those little tiny legs, very, very wobbly, but she's doing it herself. One of the things we say with Pikler is we never put a baby into a position that they can't get into themselves, because their brain is wired to develop without us doing anything extra. Now, I'm going to have a little caveat there. Obviously, there might be a child that has a mobility issue where you have to support them. But this is talking about a typical developing child without any additional needs. So here she is, she's standing up. I'm trying to think how old she was here, probably coming up to about 10 months, 11 months. She was very petite little baby, so she looks a bit younger. And then here we are, nearly a year, and she's standing up and playing outside with the fountain. And I know most of these pictures are indoors. It's just the way the pictures I've selected. She had lots and lots of time outside, laying on rugs, in parks, under trees, at forest school, all sorts of things. So I think you probably all recognise this sort of pattern of development, don't you? It's very tempting as an adult to intervene with all these things and to help children to do things, especially walking. I'm sure, I know I'm guilty of it, and other people will be as well. Sorry, a particularly noisy car going past. Holding a child's hand and helping them to walk when really they're not ready. They're not ready to do it. And but left to their own devices, they will do it. They'll do it, and probably only in a couple of weeks. And what's the rush? They don't need to be rushed to do anything, do they? We have this amazing opportunity in the early years to take our time and let children take their time too. We haven't got to rush them. And we are in a position as early years practitioners and experts in what we do to support parents to not feel pressured to rush children's development, because quite often, you know, the parent might have other friends that have got children similar ages and they can't help but compare. And we need to give parents a confidence to know that it's okay, that you don't have to push your baby to do things. Now, I haven't put it in the slides, but when I was researching Pikler and natural unfolding, I came across some interesting research about speech and natural unfolding. And that research showed that children who were put into a sitting position too early, so I think those bumbo seats are probably quite a good example, because they sit the child's bottom down quite low and the legs up fairly high. So the child's core muscles aren't strong enough to support them properly yet. The chair is supporting them. And that can have an effect on the way that the core muscles develop and strengthen, and also on a child's ability to breathe deeply. And that later has a knock-on effect on speech. Now, you wouldn't think that, would you, from looking at a bumbo seat? And I have nothing against a bumbo seat. If you want to use one, it's completely up to you. But that was just an example that I read, and I thought it just shows, actually, doesn't it, what an amazing thing the human body is. It's already wired from birth, before birth actually, to develop and to do all these things. And it doesn't need us to speed it up or intervene in any way. So that's her development up to about the age of 1. Last picture. This was our very first Stronger Practice Hub network meeting. She's looking through a little box there. She's a very cheeky thing now. So let's think about Pikler and how it's relevant, and this respectful care, how it's relevant to current practice. So in the EYFS for childminders, if any of you are here and you're not a childminder, obviously you're using the other EYFS. It stresses the importance of positive relationships and tailored individual care. Supporting PSED development is fundamental to cognitive development. That's what we were just saying, weren't we? That when the child feels secure and calm, their brain is ready to learn. And the incremental development of gross and fine motor skills. Now, for me, the key word here is incremental. It means slow. It means small steps in development, not huge ones. We're not expecting a child to walk before they're ready. We're not worried if they're not crawling when they're 7 months old. If they don't want to crawl until they're 10 months old, 12 months old, 15 months old, that's fine. But we know, as experienced practitioners, and if you haven't got a huge amount of experience, you'd know by looking in something like Development Matters or Birth to 5 Matters what typical development looks like, and you'd know when it was time if you have got concerns. Generally speaking, most children are going to do these things in these incremental developments. That picture of the child where she was on her tummy but with her arms up, she was doing that for 2 or 3 weeks. It didn't matter that she wasn't crawling. It worked perfectly for her. She could get around the room and pick things up quite happily. it was her way of moving, and that's absolutely fine. And then when she was ready, when her body was ready, she was ready to move on to the next stage. Development Matters says babies thrive when practitioners show warm, genuine interest. So that's our sense of attachment, isn't it? A sense of self is supported by babies exploring their bodies and their immediate environments. Babies should have frequent access to plenty of floor time and less time contained in holding devices. That's a generic term for any of those baby type seats, baby walkers, activity centres, all that type of thing. Again, it's not saying you can't ever use those, but if you can enable children to not spend so much time in them, then you're really supporting their development, aren't you? Birth to 5 Matters says respectful caregiving fosters confidence, autonomy, and agency, and the child feels valued. These are things we want for our children, aren't they? We want them to feel confident and have confidence in their own physical skills and know that they're loved and they're cared for and they're valued. So that's, you can see that Pikler is already quite embedded into all the documents that we use on a daily basis. So what does it look like in practice? Just a few notes really, because I know you know what it looks like in practice. It means that you know the child as an individual. Think of the principles of the areas of learning, the UIFS, of the areas of learning, where it says the unique child. We need to recognise that the child is an individual. We need to understand their likes and dislikes. For example, how does that baby like to be held? Do they like to have music when they go to sleep? Do they have a special toy that they hold? What about the 2-year-old? What does the 2-year-old find scary? What does the 2-year-old really like? We know these things, don't we, from talking to parents, but also from knowing the children really, really, really well. This is how we support their development. I always think, put yourself in their position. How would it feel? That old phrase, what does it feel like to be a child in your setting? Do they feel understood and loved and cared for and secure? And if they do, then you're supporting their development, aren't you? Every child, this is the UNCRC, has a voice, no matter how young, no matter how they communicate. For anyone who's not sure, the UNCRC is the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. It is the thing that underpins virtually every piece of legislation to do with children that we have in the UK. Because it's United Nations, it's worldwide, with the exception of a couple of countries. So how are you hearing children's opinions? How are you enabling their choice and their agency? If you've come to any of my other webinars, you'll know that agency is my big thing and I'm always talking about it. But actually, how are we doing it? Are we making all these decisions for children, or are we giving them choice and agency? How are we hearing their voice? Some children are very young. It doesn't matter if then, I don't mean literally that they're talking to us. I mean, how do you know what that child likes and what that child doesn't like? I know, for instance, I had a child during lockdown who came to me, who'd come from a very quiet home and was terrified of noise, absolutely terrified. And when the toddler group started up again, we started going back to the toddler groups and he was just distraught. He was very young, but I really realised that actually that's what it was. It was that noise. It was too noisy for me, actually. And we stopped going to the group and went to other places where he could gradually get used to the idea of a little bit more noise and a little bit more noise. And that child's at school now and is coping perfectly well. But I was listening to him. He was telling me in his behaviour and his actions what it was that he was trying to communicate. Another phrase that we use with Pikler is with the child, not to the child, especially when performing intimate care. Hopefully, long gone are the days of practitioners looking down the back of children's trousers to see if they've done a poo, or holding the child up to sniff. You know if a child needs a nappy change, don't you? Or shouting out things like, oh, you're stinky, you've done a stinky poo. Imagine what this does to the child. Is it respectful? Would you want it done to you? If you had an elderly parent who was in a home, would you want it done to them? If the answer is no, then don't do it to the child. That child needs to be loved and cared for and cuddled and treated with so much respect, because we're the person that models, along with the parents, how relationships work. And we want to model really respectful, kind, loving, caring relationships, don't we? So that's a really good phrase for me. With the child, not to the child. Just a couple of pictures here. Look, this is what it looks like. And it looks like everything else we do, doesn't it? It means that you've got time, you're slowing things down, you're letting children explore their environment, they're making friends, they're making relationships. It's not rushed, it's not hurried, it's calm. Some of you may be familiar with the idea of the slow pedagogy. This goes hand in hand really, really well with Pikler. So it looks like this, it feels like this. These are our key takeaway words. It feels calm, it feels slow. Children feel valued, they feel respected, they feel included, and they feel loved. Those are things that we do all the time, aren't they? You're all such brilliant practitioners. I know when I see you with your children, I see all these amazing things going on. But I think it's still really helpful for us to always keep that in mind. How does it feel for that child? How does it feel? How would I want to be treated? And how am I treating the child in the same way? You know, am I treating them in a respectful way? So now we come on to, unbelievably, criticisms of Pikler. And the first one is, what about tummy time? Personally, I've never been a fan of tummy time. So while tummy time is currently recommended on the NHS, it can be argued that poor muscle control can be the result of long periods spent in holding devices, car seats, buggies, baby seats, all that type of thing. But with Pikler's emphasis on free body movement, this isn't necessary. Now, I'm not saying you're never going to put a child in a car seat, or in my case, in a bike seat, or in a buggy. Of course you are, because we live in the real world and we have to do those things. But if we can enable as much time as possible of free body movement, as it said for the development matters, children need a lot of time laying on the floor, just looking around, kicking, wiggling their legs, waving their arms around. They need that time. Because their bodies are interesting to them as well, aren't they? So they really need that free body movement. And also, you know, if you yourself or anyone else you know uses a baby sling or a baby wrap, that is an amazing way to help children to support to gain muscle control over their heads and their core muscles. It does the job, and you're just carrying them around. So it's a really good way to help that and support that. But generally speaking, babies didn't do tummy time 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, and we all learned to sit up and to walk and all these sort of things. It's when we have children squashed into that sort of unnatural position in holding devices for long periods of time, they're just not getting the chance to move their bodies in the way that they should. One of the phrases that Pikler used was to never place a baby in a position it can't get to itself. So when we saw the unfolding of the baby, she was getting herself into some funny positions, but she did it herself. I didn't put her in those positions. So the only thing I would do is I would be laying her down on the blanket. And then she would, you know, move herself around to wherever she wanted to go. And then another criticism that sometimes comes up is, if Pikler felt additional resources were unnecessary, why did she invent the very expensive Pikler triangle? Some of you might have heard of the Pikler triangle. Unfortunately, it's a bit like Montessori, isn't it? When you see things in toy shops and they've got Montessori written all over them, it doesn't mean that Maria Montessori invented them. Pikler did invent the triangle because at some point in her career, she worked in an orphanage and she realised that the children weren't having opportunities to climb, and that was something she really felt that they needed. So she invented it for that reason. You don't need that. I don't have that. But, you know, you can really easily improvise, can't you? When children get to that point, you can chuck a load of cushions on the floor, or you can be outside and they're climbing over a log. Remember, they're very little children. They don't need a big piece of equipment. Please don't worry about spending your money. And if you're new to childminding or the early years, really don't buy expensive stuff. You just don't need it. It's just not necessary. When children start, oh, sorry, Damon's asking something. Yes, Damon?
Yeah, sorry. Just been something put on the chat by Rachel. She says, "Can I just ask, what would you suggest other than a sling in order for children not to have flat heads from lying on the floor?"
Oh, that's a really good question. Thank you. So, babies that are laying on the floor are moving their heads. It's when babies are in a position where they can't move their heads that you get the flat head thing. So I know we about babies going to sleep, obviously on their backs, but a baby that's not asleep, like the one we saw in the pictures, who's laying on the floor, is moving her head from a very early age. She's turning her neck, she's looking around, she's looking, trying to look up behind her all the time. So you don't get that flat head thing because they're moving around. Also, she's not laying on the floor for 20 hours. She's laying there for half an hour and then I'm picking up and giving her a cuddle, or we're going out, or she's having something to eat, or, usual stuff that you're doing with babies. So I would say don't do anything to excess. But yeah, the whole thing really is, again, if we look back in history, did people have flat heads from not having tummy time 500 years ago? Did Jane Austen have a flat head? Did William Shakespeare have a flat head? If we want to look at it like that, no, because they were able to move around. They had this sort of the way we raised children was different, and we weren't quite so focused on keeping them in these holding devices. So tummy time is a relatively new thing. Um, I can remember my first child was born in the early 90s, and it was just coming in then. And actually, I didn't do it with him because I hated to see him on his front banging his head on the floor. So I just didn't do it. And when my friends were saying, "Oh, my child's sitting up, my child's doing this," I was thinking, "Oh well, he'll just do it when he's ready to." And he was ready to do it in his own time. And I'm happy to report that he hasn't got a flat head. So it's absolutely fine. They're moving around. You're not keeping them pinned down in a position where their head isn't moving. They've got this free body movement. So I hope that answers your question. I'm happy to chat a bit more about that. And that was a really good question. Thank you. So yeah,
Rachel,
yeah.
so I was going to say, she's responded. She said, "Thank you." She said, we have had children with flat heads recently in our setting, so she just wanted to look more at causes and spreading parent awareness and information. So I think, yeah, you've definitely answered her question.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you. I
Kim.
think it's movement. They need to move. Children need to move to gain control of their bodies. And when we keep them in those artificial, would be a good word, artificial positions, it's not a natural position to be in a car seat or even a buggy, really, is it? Or a bumbo type seat or any of those things. It's not a natural position for a body to be in for any length of time. And that's when babies can't move, that's when you get those issues. Yeah, so hopefully that helps. Let's move on to the next bit now. We're getting towards the end, but I wanted to share this really lovely quote from Magda Gerber, who is a sort of she followed on. She took Pikler's work and moved it forward. And her quote is, "Childhood is not a race to see how quickly a child can read, write, or count. It is a small window of time to learn and develop at the pace that is right for each individual child. Earlier is not better." So if you can hold that in your head, that you can slow it down, I definitely recommend the Slow Pedagogy book. I can't recommend it highly enough. It's something that I think the EYFS and Development Matters and all those documents are moving towards anyway, thank goodness. But we're in a very lucky position that we get to work with these amazing children in this age group, aren't we? So I'm afraid I'm gonna have a sort of shameless promotion here of something else. If you want to delve deeper, if you're interested in finding out how to support children in a holistic way, babies and young children, so we're looking at up to the age of 2. I'm teaching a course which is going to be starting in July. I'm just currently getting all the resources together. It's free, it's fully funded, and it's a level 3, so it's something to tick off your CPD. It's taught online, and I'm going to put the link in the chat. It's online once a fortnight, and you've got a little bit of work to do in between, but it's not too massively difficult, and it will take you about 6 months. So if you're interested in finding out a little bit more, it's not focused on Pikler particularly, but just on holistic care for babies and how to sort of raise them respectfully and to have this lovely approach, this slow pedagogy approach. And also, if you want to look a little bit further into these things, you could look at Magda Gerber. I was just saying the other quote was from her. She has this amazing quote: when you hold an infant, hold him not just with your body, but with your mind and your heart. You know, when you have your own children, if any, most of you, I'm sure, have probably got children of your own, you pick that child up, you love them, don't you? You just love them. We need to have that for our child-minding children as well, or the children in our settings. They deserve that. They deserve to have that as well. Bowlby, who we talked about with his attachment theory, he said, a securely attached child will store an internal working model of a responsive, loving, reliable caregiver and of a self that is worthy of love and attention. And that is definitely what we want for our children, isn't it? It's what we want for ourselves. It would be what we want for anyone in our family, and we would want that for our children that we care for as well. So that's when we were saying about that respectful care, because we're modeling what a relationship looks like. And then you can look at the Pikler Institute. If you really want to, you can go to the Pikler Institute and study to become a Pikler practitioner. It is in Hungary, though. And then Dorothy Marlin, again, she sort of took the work of Pikler and sort of carried it on. And she has this lovely phrase, which is, babies are competent and curious. They're competent, they're clever, their brains are amazing. They're doing all these things for themselves. And we need to, as with all children we're caring for, we need to support it and enable it, but not try and control it. Here we go with any questions. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so that I can see you, and feel free to unmute yourself or take your cameras off or whatever you want to do if you want to have a chat. Yes, sorry, Damon, have you got another question?
Yeah, someone's just asked, could you put the link up for the course again, please?
Just about to do it.
You said you were going to put it in the chat, didn't you? So thank you.
There it is. So I don't know if people know, but in my other job, apart from child minding and this, I'm a tutor for ACL. So I teach, at the moment, I'm teaching the pre-child minding course. And there's lots of other courses, but I'm not the only tutor. But I'm doing the baby course as well. Yeah, Rachel, the slides will be sent out. Damon always sends them out. And here also, it always gets recorded and put on YouTube. So